Test, test. Okay, so before I start, I'm gonna ask you guys if is there anyone who hasn't seen the movie Matrix? The first movie, not the whole franchise. The first movie. You haven't seen it? Oh, you okay? So everybody has seen it. Perfect, because I assume that you know the movie. And if you haven't seen it, there will be spoilers. Okay, so first I'm gonna show you guys a clip from the movie. And in this scene, Cypher, one of the characters in the movie, is explaining what this digital rain is, what this code is. So he's explaining that.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Is that?
The Matrix? Yeah.
Do you always look at it and code it?
Well, you have to. The image translators work for the construct program. But there's way too much information to decode the Matrix. You get used to it. I don't even see the code. All I see is blonde, brunette, redhead.
So Neo is asking, what is this code on the screen? And Cypher is saying that, well, that's the Matrix. And then Neo asks, well, do you always have to look at it coded? And here's what Cypher responds. Well, of course, because there is way too much information to decode the Matrix, but you get used to it. I don't even see the code. All I see is blonde, brunette, redhead. So the first question to ask here is that, dude, what exactly are you watching on those screens? Blonde, brunette, redhead? Like, they're at war with machines, and this guy is just like watching porn on these screens. And no wonder this guy betrayed his friends at the end. Like, look at his pervert smile. Like, what were you expecting from this guy? But, okay, regardless of his porn addiction, not judging, he has a really important skill. He has a really important job. So when Neo is in the Matrix, Cypher is in the real world, he's looking at these screens, he looks at the code, and he can see what is happening in the Matrix. So he can help Neo. For example, Neo is trying to find an exit from the building, and Cypher can look at those screens, see what's happening, and help Neo to find the exit. So let's do a thought experiment now. So Cypher is, whoops. Oh yeah, I have to get used to this. So Cypher is gone, okay? They are gonna replace Cypher. So instead of assigning someone to take over Cypher's job, they imagine that they decide to build a robot. And given the plot of the movie, that would be something really ironic to do, but this is a thought experiment, like, we can do whatever we want. And that's the robot that they are gonna build, okay? And you can see that it has the same pervert smile, so apparently that's their type. But okay, here is how they're gonna build this robot. So instead of looking at the screen, they're gonna project the code onto the eyes of the robot. Well, the robot doesn't have eyes, so they will project it into its cameras, okay? So this robot will not see the real world. This robot will just see the code because it's projected onto its cameras. And then there will be a processing unit. It will take this code and convert it into images. Well, that's what Cypher did. Look at the code, convert it into images. And this robot will be so efficient, will be trained so well that when you ask it, he will say, oh, I don't even see the code. All I see is blonde, brunette, redhead. So here's I'm going to reveal my main argument, okay? And take into account that, like, I'm a little bit drunk. But here's my main argument. This is actually what is happening in the human brain. So we are just given the code, and thanks to your visual system, we don't even see the code. All we see is blonde, brunette, redhead. And you might ask, wait, if we are in the real world, why don't we just perceive the real world? Why are we perceiving a matrix? Well, here's the reason. There is way too much information to decode the real world. That's why we are given the matrix. So if you're confused, that's great, because that's what I was aiming for. Now I'm going to step back and explain what I mean by this. Okay? So it all started here, a small island in Scotland called Colonsay. Has anyone been there? Has anyone know Colonsay, the small island in Scotland? No? Okay, so exactly, it's a ridiculous place. Why would you go there? But there is a person who lives there, Cecilia Beersdale. So in 2015, her daughter was gonna get married, okay? And Cecilia went to shopping because she wanted to buy something to wear in the wedding. So whenever she finds something, she took a picture of it and sends back to her daughter to ask her opinion. So she found something and then took a picture of it, sends it to her daughter. Her daughter picks up her phone and looks at the picture, and she was confused. She showed it to her friends, and everybody was confused. So they decided to upload that photo on the internet. And once they did that, the whole world changed. And here's the photo that they uploaded to the internet in 2015 February. So in only one night, they uploaded this, and only in one night, the whole world went mad. Like planes crashed, cars exploded, rainforest caught on fire, Trump get elected, people's lives were ruined. Like look at the subheading of BuzzFeed article from that day. Question everything. So, well, this was not that groundbreaking for us visual scientists. But don't get me wrong, like this is a really unique case. This is a really amazing case, this photo. But, am I blocking it? Okay. But we had similar examples like this before. And I'm gonna show you guys those examples. So today I'm gonna show you some bunch of illusions, and you might have seen some of them because some of them went viral on the internet, of course. But hopefully you will see something new. So here's the first one. So let me get out of the presenter mode here, because so that you will see that I'm not cheating. Okay, so here you see a checkerboard. Okay, so here's a question for you. You see a square labeled A, okay? And there's also a square labeled B. So the question for you is, which one looks darker? Okay, so I'm gonna pick a volunteer. Well, if I'm picking, it's not volunteering, but whatever. Okay. You look drunk, so I'm gonna ask you. So, which one, okay, the question is not which one is darker. The question is, which one looks darker to you? A or B? A. Exactly, this is not even the question. Definitely A looks darker, right? So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna fall down. Okay, wait. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna bring this mask, cover the whole image, and I'm gonna leave out only these two squares, okay? And you will see that they have exactly the same shade of gray, actually. So, and here's the interesting part. I didn't do anything fancy here. This is just a mask, like I just masked the whole image and leave out the two squares so that you can see that they're actually exactly the same shade of gray. So here's the interesting part. Now you know that they have the same shade of gray. Now you know it. But look what happens when I take off the mask. The A looks darker. You cannot help but perceive the square A darker than B. Here's another example that's even, like I like even more. Okay, so here you see a cube composed of cubes. The quality is horrible, but focus on this color, okay? And compare the color of this. What did I do with the pointer? Okay, so focus on this color here. And compare the color of this square with this little guy. The question is, do they look similar? I mean, do they look the same color? This brownish one and this like orangish one. I'm gonna ask you again because do they look the exact same color?
Not for me, no.
Exactly. So again, let's bring out the mask to see if they are the same color. And you can see that they actually have the exact same color, exact shade of brown. Again, I'm going to take off the mask, and you will see that now you cannot help but perceive one of them as darker. Okay, so the last one before I move on. So here you have again something like a cube. You have an upper side and a lower side. And the question is the same, which one looks darker? The upper one or the lower one? Exactly, it's like so obvious. And I think by now you know where I'm going with this. Like, it is, let's bring out the mask, and you can see that it's exactly the same color. Again, I took off the mask, and you can't help but perceive it differently. Okay, so what is happening here? Okay, in order to understand what is happening here, you need to know the biggest misconception about visual perception. So, most people feel like our visual system and our eye works like a camera. We open our eyes and we just see what is out there. Much like a camera, you turn it on and the camera starts to record whatever is out there, right? So, there are some similarities between how a camera works and how our eye works, but there's a big fundamental difference, and here's that difference. When an image falls on the back of the camera, on the film, we humans look at that camera, look at that image, and see, aha, like that's a tree. But when the image falls on our retina, on the back of our eye, who is looking at that image? No one. There are no little humans inside our head looking at that image. The only thing that is there is just neurons firing chemicals. That's it. And these poor neurons have to figure out that it's an image of a tree without looking at that image. Just firing one type of signal. That's it. And imagine how difficult that task would be. Well, if you can't imagine, here's a metaphor. So this is like, imagine that you are trying to figure out the model of a car by just looking at its tire tracks on snow. That will be a really difficult job, right? But actually, it's even worse than that. In visual perception, it's more like you're trying to figure out the model of the car, but you don't even know which tire track belongs to the car you are trying to figure out. And actually, it's even worse than that. You have to do this blindfolded. You cannot look at the tire tracks. And it's a warm... Oh, okay. And it's a warm, sunny day and the snow is melting. So you have to be better quick. Because when you open your eyes, you just see. It's so fast. So this is what your visual system has to go through whenever you open your eyes. So that's why visual perception is more like problem solving. It requires some, come on. Okay, I'm gonna stand here. Yeah, right, okay. So it requires some kind of reasoning, okay? And here's an example that will make it more clear. So when you are looking at an object, so the way you perceive the color of the object depends on two things. One, how the object is illuminated. Okay, that's one. Two, what type of color, what type of light this object reflects. Two things, okay? So if you are looking at a red object under white light, no problem. The red block will reflect the red light and you will perceive it as red. That's easy. But if you are looking at a red block under a yellow light, then the light that is reflected from the red block will not be red. It will be something different, like orange. But you will not perceive the black as orange. You will still perceive the block as red. And the reason is because your visual system is a great problem solver. And here's the problem that it's trying to solve here. Okay, I am looking at this block under a yellow light, and the color that's arriving at me is orange. What type of an object would reflect orange light under a yellow light? And then through some reasoning and complex calculations and computations, your visual system decides that only a red object would do that. And then, hence, you perceive it as red. So, and again, like, I don't have to go through it again. If you are looking at a red block under a blue light, Again, the light that is arriving on your eye will be different, but you will still perceive it as red. So here what's happening is you are perceiving the color, which is the output of your visual system's reasoning, okay? And that's exactly what's happening in the dress photo. So the problem with the dress photo is, when you look at the photo, how the dress is illuminated is not apparent. Your visual system cannot figure out how it is illuminated, so it has to make an assumption. If your brain assumes that you are viewing the dress under a shadow, like poorly illuminated, then you will perceive it as white and gold. If your brain assumes that you are looking at this dress under a really well illumination, like direct sunlight, then you will perceive it as black and blue. So that's why people are seeing different colors, because their visual system is making different assumptions. And actually, I don't know whether this happens to you, but I see this one a little bit more like white and goldish, and this one more like black and blue. Okay, I will pick someone. Does it happen to you as well? Like, do you see these two dresses the same color? But actually, they have the same color on the image. I mean, I can bring out the mask, but I don't want to go over there. So they actually have the same exact color, but you don't perceive it that way. So, and, okay, so the main point here is that instead of perceiving what is really out there, you're perceiving the output of your visual system reasoning. And here's another example. This doesn't just apply to colors. It also applies to shape or depth as well. So here's an example that I really like. I'm gonna go out of the presenter mode here again. Okay, so here, the first question. So here you see like circles, right? Some of them looks like they're bumped, like they're protruding out towards you. Some of them are indented inside, like going into the screen. The question is, which one? The central one or the surrounding one? Which one looks like they are protruding out? I'm gonna pick you because we made eye contact. So which one do you see? The surrounding one or the central one looks like they are like bumps protruding out? The surrounding ones, right? Exactly. The surrounding, I mean, to me too. But it's a screen, nothing is protruding, of course. But it looks like the surrounding ones are protruding. Look what happens now. I'm just gonna take this image, turn it upside down, that's the only thing I'm doing, and see how it looks like now. So now, it looks like the center one is protruding, while the surrounding ones are indented. So what's happening here, I'm not gonna go into the details, but basically, your visual system has an assumption about the world. The light always comes from above. And look what happens when I turn the image upside down. So right now, look at the center one. The bottom of the center one is dark. So when I take this image and turn it upside down, now the top part of that center one is dark. So your visual system perceives this as a shadow, and if the light is from coming above, if the shadow is there, again, your visual system just like do some reasoning and through some calculations and computations, it decides that that one is indented. Or depending on the where the shadow is, it decides that it's protruding. So again, whatever your visual system decides, that's what you're gonna perceive. Okay, here's another example. Okay, so here, I hope that you can perceive it from the projector. Do you perceive rotation, like motion? Yes. Okay, so here there is actually nothing moving. But when you look at different parts of this image, you will perceive rotation, you will perceive motion. And you can actually stop that motion. Just focus your eyes on a single location. Don't move your eyes, just focus on a single location. The motion and rotation will stop. And once you stop moving your eyes, you will perceive the motion again. So what's happening here is, because of how these yellow, blue, dark, and white things are positioned, that triggers your motion receptors as you move your eyes, and your visual system thinks that there has to be motion there, even though there is no motion. So if your visual system decides, after all these reasonings and calculations and computations, if your visual system decides that there has to be a motion, you will perceive motion, regardless whether there's motion or not.
Do you have a computer?
Next one.
It's not letting me
Okay,
Google.
so this is also about motion. So here we see a box, and in a box there's a ball. And this ball will start moving like this, okay? So when I look at this image, it looks like the ball is start moving from the left front corner of the box and goes all the way back to the right back corner. I mean, that's what I perceive. You might perceive it differently. But here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna add a dark patch to this box. Basically, I'm gonna add a shadow to this ball and see how it changes the motion you perceive. So here's the thing. In both cases, the ball is doing the exact same motion on the image. The only thing that I did, I just added a shadow. And let's change the position and the motion of the shadow. Let's look at what happens to the ball. Again, in all these three cases, the ball is doing the exact same motion on the image. The only difference is the position of the shadow, or whether there's a shadow or not. Again, the main point stays the same. Your visual system will you'll do some calculations and computations depending on where the shadow is, and that's what you are going to perceive. Okay? Okay, so here's another one. So here you will see parallel lines. They look parallel, right? The reason is they are parallel. I created them on PowerPoint. So they're actually parallel. And you see a pattern there, like black and white boxes. Those squares are also parallel. Everything is parallel here. But look what happens when I take these lines and slide it through that pattern. So here it goes. Well, it shouldn't look like parallel now. That's the illusion. Does it look like parallel? Well, it doesn't look like actually. Okay. So now they don't look like parallel, even though they're actually parallel. I don't know how it's seen in the projector. It is really seen really well on my laptop. But in any case, you can Google this. It's cafe wall illusion. And the reason why this is called the cafe wall illusion is actually a vision scientist noticed this on a wall of a cafe in Bristol. And that's why they call this illusion cafe wall. Even though all these lines are parallel, they don't look like parallel. That's the illusion. Okay, so now I told you that we have code projected on our eyes, right? So what do I mean by that? That's what I'm going to explain. So this little guy here is Spirit. NASA sent this to Mars to take pictures, right? And when this little guy takes pictures, it has to send them back to Earth. So, but of course, this little guy cannot just go online and Snapchat and send the photo to NASA. Like, it has to find a way to send these photos. And this is actually an example of what it sends back to NASA. So these numbers you see is actually a photo taken in Mars. So here's what those numbers indicate. So each number indicates the intensity of light falling on that pixel. So you see here, the numbers are really small, right? That's like a dark patch. And here the numbers are really large. So probably it's a really lighted area. So can you see what this is a photo of? Can you figure it out by just looking at these numbers? I can't either, but maybe Cypher, if he could probably look at this and see what is there. But when NASA takes these numbers, they have to run these numbers through really complicated algorithms with their powerful computers, and then they convert these numbers into images. And here's what this is an image of. This is actually a part of an image of a rock in Mars that NASA called sashimi. Well, NASA gives names to all the rocks they found on Mars, and for some reason they called this sashimi. I guess probably they were hungry that day or something. But in any case, this is what happened with Spirit and NASA. And actually what is happening on our eye is not that different. So what we have on our retina are just receptors. And so imagine that each hexagon here is a receptor on your retina, okay? And the only thing that these receptor does is, depending on the intensity of light, they just signal one type of signal. they just fire a signal, okay? So if the intensity of light is really high on a receptor, it will fire even more signals. If the intensity of light is really low, it will not. It will just fire less signals. Okay. And here you can see, for example, when an image is shown to our retina, these numbers indicate the number of signals each receptor sends per second. Okay. Those are the numbers. So if the number is really high, it means that a really high intensity of light is falling there. So this is actually what your visual system gets. This is what is given to your visual system. And your visual system, like Cypher did, takes these numbers and convert it to this rich visual experience that you have right now whenever you open your eyes. And actually it's even more interesting because, well, this is a static image, right? Nothing is moving there. But in the world, we are constantly moving, or objects in the world is moving. So the image on our retina is constantly changing. So actually what is happening here is, it's more like this. This is what is given to your visual system. This is what's happening on your retina. And your visual system has to figure out what is going on just from this. And thanks to your visual system, you are not even seeing the code. You're just seeing blonde, brunette, redhead. So the last thing I'm going to explain is, why is this? Why don't we perceive the reality as it is, but we have to perceive the matrix or this virtual reality or whatever? I'm going to explain this, and in order to explain this, I have to tell you the famous love story between this Australian jewel beetle and beer bottles. So in Australia, there's a type of beetle, and they are now endangered because they are going extinct, like almost extinct, because all the male beetles are busy having sex with beer bottles. And the reason why this is happening is not because the Australian beer is that damn good. It's because the beer bottles in Australia have golden brown color. They are shiny, and they have bumps and dimples at the end of the bottle. Do you know what a female jewel beetle looks like? They have golden brown color, they are shiny, and they have bumps and dimples on their exteriors. So that's why they are going endangered now. And actually, Australia has to change its beer bottles in order to save its beetles. So think about it. These bugs, these beetles, have survived thousands of years, have mated and survived successfully thousands of years. And probably they thought that they are seeing reality as it is, right? But actually, the evolution has given them shortcuts or hacks or heuristics, right? And it helped them for thousands of years. It increased their evolutionary fitness. It was better than seeing the reality as it is. But here's the kicker. We humans are in the same ship with these beetles. The same evolutionary principles and pressures that applies to this beetle also applies to us. So I'm not saying that we are as simple as a jewel beetle. Well, to be fair, probably there are people on Earth who is trying to have sex with their beer bottles. Again, I'm not judging, but what I'm saying is we have something in parallel with this jewel beetle, which is we are also blind to our own blindness, like these jewel beetles, because we are in the same ship, we are living in the same world, and we are dealing with the same evolutionary principles. But you might ask, wait, seeing the reality as it is should increase our fitness, right? If we can see the reality as it is, then that should increase our evolutionary fitness. But here's a metaphor that would make things more clear. This is a desktop interface, right? You use this to interact with your computer. Here's a question for you. So here you see a folder, right? So this icon in this desktop is blue, rectangular, and it's located in the lower right corner of the desktop. The question is, do you think that there is something in this computer, not in the monitor, there is something in this computer that is blue, rectangular, and located in the lower right of the computer? Of course not. That's the whole point of an interface. This interface is there not to show the reality of the computer. The interface is there to hide that reality so that you can interact with the computer in an easier way. Because the reality of the computer is too complex. You don't want to deal with diodes or resistors or billions of bytes of softwares or anything. If you have to deal with that complexity, you wouldn't be able to even write a text file. Thanks to this interface, then we should talk later. I see he's like, no. Okay, so thanks to this interface, it's easier to interact with this computer. So in the same way, we are perceiving what we perceive is an interface because it makes it easier to deal with the real world. So we are in the real world, but the real world is too complex to deal with. That's why what we perceive is an interface. So contrary to the movie Matrix, in this case, Matrix is actually helping us to stay alive in this world. Or maybe they make you think so. You never know. Okay, so I'm just going to end with a quote from Cypher. So here's what he says. I know this steak doesn't exist. I know that when I put it in my mouth, the Matrix is telling my brain that it's juicy and delicious. After 9 years, you know what I realize? Ignorance is bliss. So I hope that the Matrix is telling you that this talk was entertaining and educating and not too long. And thank you for your attention.